BTB listeners, thank you so much for checking out today's episode. Listen, if this episode inspires you, do me a favor and take 5 seconds to shoot me a like and subscribe to the podcast. There are several more exciting guests that are in the pipeline, and I just can't thank you enough for your continued support, and let's keep paying the mission forward.
I've put myself in a position through work off court with business and now with social media where I can fail indefinitely and there's not the same repercussions to someone else, right? Because I did the behind the scenes work to put myself in that position. Obviously, there's different situations. I got to play college tennis, right? There's different things that set you up in life. I'm sure my parents they worked hard to give me a great opportunity. I'm sure there's people without that opportunity. But I would never have done this if I didn't put myself in a position where I could enjoy it and it was actually feasible. There's a difference between having a dream and then like, are you willing to do all of the not dream part of it?
What are you built to be? What are you built to become? The time is now. The time is right now. You weren't built to break. You were built to be something greater. Welcome to season 2 of the BTB Project. I'm your host, Kollman Gearhart. I was an overweight kid, the one counted out, lost 100 pounds, found purpose in the pain, and turned my setbacks into a story worth telling. This podcast isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. It's about identity, discipline, and comebacks. Getting up one more time and becoming who we're always meant to be. If you're ready to go deep, do the work, and live out what you're built to be, you're in the right place. Let's lock in, let's rise, and let's get to work. Well, the BTB Project is once again humbled. And sometimes when I think about the word influencer, it's not enough justification of the impact that I believe this young man has been not only on the game of tennis, but I know his story is going to impact you as the listener. He comes from a college tennis background, being at the University of Toledo, unbelievable tennis channel that you've got to check out. 13.4 thousand subscribers on YouTube, unbelievable influence on Instagram. I love his story of chasing the pro dream. This conversation is going to shed a lot of light of what that looks like and the impact of his story. Cole Shoults, welcome to the BTB Project.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm super excited.
Awesome, man. Well, I know that the scenes are a little bit different for you right now. Looking out the window in Florida is much different than maybe when you're in college looking out the window in Toledo. Could you fill the listeners in on what it's like to be down in the hot, humid, rainy Florida grounds?
I think you just summarized it pretty well. The biggest change moving down here has been the heat for sure. I knew it was going to be a little bit difficult to get going, but I've been down here about 3 weeks now. The first 3 weeks have just been me learning how to towel off in between every point, learning how often I need to change my shoes, how many gallons of water I need to drink to not be overly hydrated. So it's been a good start. Still got some learning to do on that front.
That's awesome, man. Coming from Colorado, I'll never forget spending 2 months down at Wesley Chapel, Florida in Saddlebrook.
Mm-hmm.
I remember every 2 to 3 hours, I was switching shoes because I would sweat so much that my shoes would turn into sponges.
Yeah, they're coming out. The sweat comes out. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know that you being a Michigan guy and spending some time in Indiana where it can be a little bit humid. I mean, how long did it take you to get acclimated to conditions like that?
I would say I'm not acclimated yet. Definitely, I'm in the process, and most of it is dealing with the sweat. You said 2 to 3 hours. I'm like a 45 minutes guy, so I'm taking 4 pairs of shoes on the court, 3 beach towels, and then just constantly, I'm sort of always paying attention to that. Otherwise, it really gets in the way of your practice. Lucky for me, my coach, Ruan Rulafsta, he's been great. And he's sort of almost coached me on managing the sweat. So our next conversation, I'll be fully acclimated.
And being able to reflect back, I know that the pro tour, trying to play at the highest level, tennis is such an interesting sport because being less than a one percenter, I always quantify that for people who even make it to college tennis out of high school.
Right.
What you're trying to do to play against some of the best guys in the world, watching these videos of you in Thailand running around, figuring out these ground games, and any subtle mistake, anything that's left short is going to be put away.
Yeah.
I mean, in all honesty, what has the journey been like for you, and what prompted you to go after this?
Yeah. I mean, the hardest part for me was actually putting myself out there, not even necessarily on social media, but just putting myself out there to be like, I still want to try this. I think that was maybe the biggest thing stopping me from doing it. I knew that anyone would tell you that it's super difficult to try to be a professional tennis player, let alone be a successful professional tennis player who makes a living. But that wasn't really the reason I was not doing it. It was more of a personal, do I have what it takes to even just say I want to attempt it? And so once I got over the hump of telling my friends and family that I wanted to try, it was pretty easy for me to do it online, and show off what I was doing, because I felt like, okay, if I got the people around me backing me on this, then it doesn't really matter how things are going. I'm doing what I want to do, and that's probably what it's all about at the end of the day.
Do you believe that in your life, this risk that you took, is this something that you've ever experienced before? Or was this the first time that you really took a leap of faith, maybe had some naysayers be like, what in the world are you doing? I did a little bit of homework, man, and saw that funny tennis, I don't know if it was like Tennis Express or like the Reddit of tennis, to where they're talking about your journey a little bit, and these people are like, these guys have no idea what it takes to be a 14 UTR, and this guy's completely over his head. And the whole time, man, I'm reading that, I'm just like, you know what, good on you for even putting your head out there. And secondly, man, as you mentioned, like, what you're learning in this process is probably so deeply valuable, because your videos is what tells the story, and the feedback that you give, man, these are things that I wish I knew when I was growing up, trying to make it as well. But ultimately, when I say all of that, was this a big leap of faith for you, or the first time you've ever done something like that?
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt, this has been probably of all the things that I've learned on the court, the biggest thing here with the whole journey has been the risk. I would say I was very risk averse my whole life. I talked to, I have good parents. It gave me a very good path to follow right through school. I got a scholarship. I was studying as a pre-med student, could have gone on to med school. I mean, I think I'm probably more proud of just taking the risk to try any of this than I will be of the results of however the social media or the tennis goes. Actually, really appreciate the negative side of it. I mean, I don't appreciate when I read it, that's for sure. But the changes that I've seen in myself since I've started to consume that sort of negative feedback, I just think I'm way more resilient and humble. I don't really know what the right word is. I just think that I handle things a lot better now that I know. I just have come to accept it. I'm like, there's just going to be people who are negative about what you're trying to do, and it makes you stronger in your beliefs of no, this is what I want to do regardless of what people say. It does help that it is going well. It's it helps that I can see it, people appreciate it. There's tons of there's way more positive than negative.
Yeah, so I've been able to have on tennis influencers like XXL Tennis and Dion that we've talked about, and shared their story of how it all came about with XXL Tennis. Some dude at his club said his backhand was legendary, and hey, just get it on camera and see what happens. And all of a sudden he puts it on camera and Venus Williams comments, right?
Yeah.
And then the King Dion, the guy is at TCU right now in phase 2 of his social media upbringing, where he's actually a hitting partner on the TCU women's tennis team.
Oh, I know all about it.
and being able to watch him really come from nothing to where he had a GoFundMe years before that just to get a car.
Right.
Well, ultimately, when it comes to you getting the resiliency and the courage to go do something like this, do you remember the first video you posted and when you realized, hey, I may be onto something here?
I started practicing again way before I started making the videos. Probably 6 months before I started making videos, I started practicing. And that was my brother's doing. So I have a younger brother and he played up until his first year of college tennis and then had just way too many knee surgeries, too many to count. Like he's like, all right. But he came, he was working with me at the club that I am the director for. And so he was working there and I was playing a practice set against one of the kids just for fun. And he's like, you really look like yourself when you're playing tennis. You look more, you just look natural when you're playing. It's like, oh, and he's like, I think you should just try, just for fun, just try to play. And so he pushed me to start again, gave me, sometimes you just need someone to give you a little belief. That didn't really have anything to do with the social media. And then to start the social media, it was 100% me feeling like I needed to take a risk. Like I feeling like I needed to do something uncomfortable, feeling like I set my life up in a way where I could go each day without getting any challenge or negative feedback, which is super comfortable, but super maybe not great for you. I was like, all right, I got to do something that's way out of my comfort zone. And making videos of myself trying to play professional tennis was, I mean, that is like hot button. That's the top of the list for things that I would be worried about doing. And so I mean, it's hard to even remember that, which is crazy, right? Hard to even remember those feelings, but that's the start of it.
Yeah, I remember the first tennis lesson I ever had. I started the game at 14 years old. I went to
Mm.
Colorado Tennis Legends out here that had a son that played college tennis and just was one of the best, right? So I go and I pay
Yeah.
my $140 and he looks at this kid that's, 5'11", 330 pounds. And it's like, what's your goal, Kollman, in doing this? And I said,
Yeah.
I want to play Division I college tennis. Right. And at this point,
Yeah.
if a rally went past 3 balls, I was out of breath and, huffing on the sidelines. And
Right.
at that time, he looked at me and said, there's no way. There's no
Yeah.
way you're going to be able to do this. And ultimately, kind of that criticism and negativity that you're talking about, even though I think that coach was well intentioned with what he said because he was being honest, he
Right.
was telling me what I needed to hear. It was that fuel on the
Mm.
fire that propelled me into figuring it out, right? To
Right.
be able to learn, grow, adapt, and adjust, to change my body to go after and eventually accomplish my dream. But as I'm saying all of that, I'm talking to you about the initial fear of promoting yourself and showing this journey, to then having some criticism, to then look at the last couple of days. I know you just were playing a tennis tournament, and between rain and playing matches, you probably had an outcome that wasn't what exactly you were looking for, and being
Oh
able
yeah.
to overcome that adversity. So, what do you think you've learned the most so far?
I think for me, it has the most to do with what other people think. I mean, I don't know how other people feel on court, but the amount of time that I spent previously worrying about what my coach or the person on the other side or people watching or my parents when I came home, what they thought about what I was doing on court, I think it occupied way more of my brain than I realized, and probably an unhealthy amount. And social media might be the worst thing to do if that's a problem for you, because it is all about what other people think. That is literally the whole point of creating content. And so how to accept the negativity. Well, let's just talk about the results. So I just played this tournament. It was like my first tournament since I started playing full time, and I won my first round, lost my second round to a guy who I would say like the result was probably a bad loss on paper. Like if you looked at it on paper, you go, that's if you're trying to play professional tennis, that's not a great start. Actually, I found that to be really freeing. Just in the last couple of days, that result really freeing of it happening. me being so worried about like what it meant, and then realizing like, oh, just right back to practice, make more videos. The people who are supporting you are still there. And so it's almost like the opposite effect. The more feedback that I'm getting from people, the more I realize that I just got to focus on my own, like, what do I think about what's going on?
Yeah, and I think that's what I just appreciate about following your journey is your complete and utter transparency, whether it's sitting in the car or opening your trunk and taking off your shoes and sharing a story, man. It's like, to me, like going back to that coach that told me you're not going to be able to do it. I really do try to be a realist, but also a dreamer at the same time.
Right.
And to connect this to what you do, there's this perception right now in American tennis to go out and play pro. I work with kids all the time, like, yeah, I want to be a pro tennis player.
Yeah,
Knowing the margins of getting there, it is so challenging.
for
And
sure.
I can't imagine even being an optimistic guy like yourself, how it feels sometimes to know, hey, I did have this bad loss on paper, and here's how I'm going to pivot and adjust with my coach to keep going. But ultimately, if you could maybe give advice to the dreamers out there right now that are high school tennis players that want to play college or want to play the tour. I've talked to guys that are 12 and a half UTRs that think that they're going to make a D1 roster, and some of them don't, right?
Right.
Or they are coming out of college and they want to play on the tour and they realize, holy crap, like just
Yeah.
to break the top 150, you got to be ridiculous. So
Right.
there's a lot to unpack with what I just said, but if you had to give advice on what this landscape looks like pro tennis 2025, what comes to mind?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll talk less about the tennis aspect. I'm not playing futures yet. I'm not playing challengers yet, so I don't know. I mean, that's the goal. I talk more about the dream part of it because I get a lot of messages from people saying they want to do this and that. And I think I am a pretty realistic person, even though this has been a risk. My advice to them is always, how much work are you willing to do to make it possible? Because people can say what they'd like about my actual tennis level. That's one thing. But I've put myself in a position through work off court with business and now with social media where I can fail like indefinitely and there's not the same repercussions to someone else, right? Because I did the maybe behind the scenes work to put myself in that position. Obviously, there's different situations. I got to play college tennis, right? There's different things that set you up in life. I'm sure my parents did it. They worked hard to give me a great opportunity. I'm sure there's people without that opportunity, but I would never have done this if I didn't put myself in a position where I could enjoy it and it was actually feasible, if that makes sense. You
Yeah.
know, there's a difference between having a dream and then like, are you willing to do all of the not dream part of it? That was sort of like how I spent all of the time after school, was like doing a lot of non dream. It was not my dream to do all those other things, but it made it possible.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head is with a dream, in order to even do what you're doing, or even the guys that are at the highest level with a Sinner Alcaraz right now, I believe that you have to have a little bit of a delusional sense of confidence of
Mm.
no matter what, right? You are one of the best players in the world. And I think it's interesting because the dream or the lack of doing dream things, it's kind of more the boring stuff, right? It's going out and practicing, it's doing the dynamic stretching, it's doing all the rehab, all the things that aren't as glamorous. When you think of what you've gone through so far, has there been an aspect that has been more eye-opening than another chasing pro tennis?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is the financial side. When we talk about everything that we've talked about, even everything I just said about the dream part of it, I mean, top of the list has to be finances. That's the only thing that I have hit that I've done well going into try to play professional tennis has been put myself in a business spot with the club and with the social media to actually do it and do it the right way. I think that is maybe that's number one. If you can find that, maybe some people have help from family or other maybe countries that are getting support if you're already ranked high enough. But in terms of like the physical side, I think the patience has been the hardest part for me, is playing college tennis, then not playing for a few years, and then expecting my body to be at that same level of mobility and speed and recovery, and just not being able to do those same things as quickly as I expected. That's probably been mentally the most difficult, because of like, just can't believe that it's going to be another week, going to be another week, going to be another week before you're back to that level.
When you think of that time period after college to coming back, my goal was to go from high school to college tennis, and I kind of had the youth years still with me to change my body. Knowing what I've been through, I can't imagine what it was like for you to take that couple year hiatus and come back and push your body. I mean, what was the hardest part with that? I'm truthfully, was it to keep your body from preventing injuries? Was it to develop more fast twitch?
I think I have two answers. One for sure is coming down here into the heat, just getting you the tennis cardio, whatever you want to call that. It's a combination of a bunch of different things, but being able to start and stop both in the point, but like in between points, super high intensity, and then recover and getting that back. I just think, I mean, I was still a fit guy after college, but it's just different. And also the intensity that my coach wants me to play at, or that I think probably all professional tennis players are playing at, was an upgrade for me. So that was difficult to get used to. But the other part of this, which is super honest, is like the motivation aspect of dealing with like of practice not being fun, right? Like I would say the first couple of weeks, I've been down here for a few weeks. The first few weeks, I really did not enjoy. I enjoyed the idea of what I was doing, but the actual tennis practice, I mean, it was miserable for me and probably for my coach, and like of understanding that you're going to get to the other side of that is tough. I feel that now maybe I've turned the corner a little bit, but yeah, just the motivation, like, okay, just keep going. It's going to get a little bit easier.
Take us through maybe that first practice when you hit Florida and you're thinking through just complete and utter misery. What does it look like?
Yeah, well, there's some backstory to the first practice. So a huge part of setting this all up has been the brand and the business side of the social media. So once Ruan told me it was possible for us to go full time, then I spent probably 2 or 3 months just nonstop traveling, trying to make like huge content videos that would pop off the screen on social media, but also trying to connect and make like real brand partnerships, deep partnerships that could make it financially possible to sustain it. And so the 2 weeks before my first practice, I flew from the US to Thailand, and then Thailand to China, and then China back to Detroit, and then drove from Detroit to Florida. And I was sick for the first practice down here. So it was, by the time that I was actually on court, I mean, it's like I can't even think about the tennis. I just want to just get me home, just get me through this practice, and we'll like work our way up. So it was a huge relief to be down here, but also a huge struggle for sure.
I know we've talked about the meat and potatoes of tennis to this point, but I'm just curious with the content creation side, who's been able to help you roadmap and forecast like, hey, you should cross promote and build some of the partnerships with these brands before hitting your time in Florida? Who's helped you with that? And has that been a learning curve as well?
Yeah, so we talked about risk earlier. Maybe the other thing that I've learned through this process, and I don't know how good of advice this is. I feel like it's an important part of being a content creator, is really trusting your own opinion because it's only original if you're the one making it. And so when it comes to a lot of this stuff, it's been, I mean, I look to my family, like close circle, for feedback, but I've tried to make all the decisions personally, just because I think the one piece of feedback that I get a lot is that it's really original. And I don't watch anyone else's videos to give myself ideas. I don't try to follow someone else's business plan, just because I think this whole thing has been about like me backing myself. And so that's what I've done, is try to make gut decisions and then maybe work on the back end to make the decision right, if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. I just got goosebumps myself because 3 years ago when I started the BTB project, I was told for the last 13, 14 years as I've coached, like, hey man, you got this voice. Like,
Mhm.
have you ever thought about podcasting? And the whole
Yeah.
time I was so hesitant because I was worried about perception, comparison. I'd listen to podcasts myself and I would never be able to imagine being on the same level as them, right? So I
Right.
was like paralysis by analysis and never took the chance.
For sure.
But ultimately, what ended up happening was the moment that I just decided to put the mic on and go.
Mm.
I'll never forget this. My first episode, man, I ended up getting a call from one of my former clients. I was about 7 years removed from when I worked with her. And she was going through some pretty severe depression and anxiety and some
Mm.
tough stuff. And she called me up and she's like, Coach, that episode you just released, like, that's exactly what I needed to hear. I'm on the side of the road up in rural Colorado coming back home because I know I need to do some different things in my life, and that episode helped me.
Awesome.
So
Yeah.
when you hear that and you think of this whole process, this whole journey that you've been on, can you recall a moment where a piece of your content impacted someone in a way where you're just like, man, how is this even possible?
Yeah, I don't really realize. So when I go to these Battle of Boca tournaments down here, I didn't realize how much people were really using the advice that I was giving. And that's probably been I get tons of great messages, and I appreciate every positive message and comment is like, does actually lift my spirit. I mean, it really does help me for sure. But going and then meeting people in person, even people who are better than me, which is the best. That's what I think is so funny, and what helps me get through some stuff is like, I'm helpful even if I'm not better than this person. This past weekend, a young man came up to me and just sort of like super kind, introduced himself and started talking about the content, and he really knew, like, we knew each other. I'd never met him, but he knew me, and we're talking as if we've known each other for a long time. And so I think that eye-opening experience where you're like, oh, I am actually making an impact, that is pretty fulfilling, probably more fulfilling than numbers on the screen, because the numbers sort of start to not feel like anything after a certain point.
Yeah, I'm sure that those types of moments is what allows you to keep going. And, listen, we can talk about licking our wounds and taking the bad comments or the tough losses. Like, those things are going to come. We all know that. But ultimately, those moments of where you have impacted someone's life and they're willing to come up and share that has to be super rewarding. And I want to, kind of take a step back and think about your overall tennis journey.
Mm.
It's a really interesting time in American tennis because I see it as a high school coach to where kids think that they can play D1 college tennis, but they have a 9 UTR, or
Right.
they want to play on the tour. And the reality is it's tough, or
Right.
they want to play college tennis and there's NCAA regulations and roster limits for low revenue generating sports. All the things that I think you were coming out of college, you were kind of, that was more on the tail end of your career. And for me, it was more on the way after my career to where the walk-on story might not even exist anymore. But
Mm.
ultimately, When you think of tennis development and what you've done from starting tennis to where you're at now, do you believe that you've been able to have a pretty good ideal path, or would there be some things that you would have changed back in the day?
Yeah, I think that's probably the number one driving factor behind me starting to play again. Uh, to be completely honest, I don't really take that much pride in my tennis results. Like me getting an ATP point or getting to top 1,000 or a UTR of a certain number. Personally, I don't feel a lot from that, but when you talk about, like, how I'm playing is, like, a huge I mean, it's, like, as big of an impact on my mood, whether that's good or bad, has as big of an impact on my mood and my emotional stability, whatever it is, and trying to understand tennis has been the greatest challenge and journey probably. So I don't think that I did everything right. Definitely not. I grew up on fast indoor hard courts in northern Michigan with really old school coaching, really old school, like super old school, one-handed backhand when I was younger,
Nice.
all about coming to the net, playing, I'm playing with old like in like 50 and over leagues when I'm 11 years old. So I was I don't think that I was learning the perfect way. I also don't think that I'm necessarily super tennis talented. I don't I mean, I know people who are. I don't think I'm untalented, but I don't think I'm necessarily gifted. I've had coaches tell me, coaches who I love dearly, who are like, you just don't have hand-eye coordination like some of these guys. So I get that. But I think since my parents and my family took that leap to move from Michigan to, across well, not across the country stretch, separate states, my parents living in separate states to make it work. And since we did that, it's sort of been like my personal quest of like, okay, I'm going to figure tennis out. I'm going to figure out what have I been missing? What can I do? Because I see other people playing. I know that my experience is not the same as that person, right? I know that that person who's a 15 UTR, 14 UTR is probably feeling differently on the court. What can I change to inch my way towards that?
And being able to think about the ideal path, if I'm a high school player that wants to play in college, it looks like you made a tremendous sacrifice. Your family made a tremendous sacrifice. I took a gap year. I moved away from my family and stayed in an old abandoned women's shelter for 13 months because I
Yeah.
couldn't afford to stay on the resort. And 6 hours a day, two coaches from Poland yelling run and the S word at me all the time
Yeah.
because that's what the two words of English that they knew. I mean, as I say all that, man, I mean, like, if I'm an inspiring guy that wants to play in college, how do I develop based off of what's helped you?
I think that finding a coach that you trust, and now it's probably easier than ever because there's so much access to people online. You can do things through video, and I mean, I'm not saying all people who do video coaching are great, but I do know of coaches online who do a great job. So I would say finding a coach that you trust and then being really committed and patient with changes on the court, and then maybe being super aggressive in terms of like developing yourself as an athlete. I feel like a lot of times it's maybe the opposite. I think for me, it was like I was always trying to take big swings with changes on the courts. Like I was always trying to get this huge fix, get this like turn my forehand from trash to not trash. And then off the court, I was like just slowly developing as an athlete. I sort of wish I had done the opposite. Get a plan on the court, stick to it, and then be aggressive off the court. And then besides that, look for things that other people are not willing to do. Maybe play, like I always think playing a lot of tournaments, playing a lot of matches is a big struggle for kids. Struggle for me for sure. Tournaments a lot of times can be stressful, can be difficult as a young player. I think pushing yourself to play as much as you can is, every tennis player listening to this knows how uncomfortable it is to play a match. And so maybe that's where that extra couple percent points that you need is behind that wall of discomfort.
Yeah, discomfort is always going to be there. And I don't know what it is, but there's these people that are what I call match tough, right? Where they spend the time licking their wounds in tournaments. And from a coaching point of view, I know you can attest to this, is it's hard to teach someone to be match tough. The only way that they can experience that is to experience it. As you've been able to immerse yourself in that, there's probably been some setbacks. If you think of injuries or mental midget moments that you've had in this process, what comes to mind that was maybe the toughest to overcome?
Yeah, so injuries have definitely played a part. My senior year of high school, I got injured in the first time I ever qualified for Kalamazoo Boys Nationals, my very first singles match, first game. I did win the game, so that's good, but my foot exploded. And so then I had to get surgery on my foot. And then my foot, actually, I broke my foot 3 summers in a row. So that was after my junior year of high school, then after my senior year of high school, and then after my freshman year of college. So that was those were setbacks. I always feel like looking back though, for me, mental midget moments were what we just talked about, like veering away from uncomfortable competition, veering away from all of that stuff because I was maybe too prideful. I said earlier that my results don't have that much impact on how I feel about myself. That was not the case when I was younger. I don't think that's the case for most junior players. I think their results are a huge aspect of their self, how they feel about themselves. Also, it's a big social thing, right? What your UTR is compared to your friends, what school you're going to compared to your friends. If I could have found a way to, I didn't, so I don't know the answer, but if I could have found a way to get out of that, to get around people who are kind of promoting healthy or way much more productive habits in terms of like reflecting on your results, I feel like I would have at least had a better experience. I'm not sure saying I would have done better, but at least I would have enjoyed the process of competing more. It's sort of become, I can't imagine it's that enjoyable for junior players right now.
You're right. Yeah. I mean, you see these crazy line calls, you see parents like doing fisticuffs in the stands, you see,
Yeah.
I mean, you see just a bunch of craziness. And what I think is even more telling is, my wife and I the other day turned on Amazon Prime, and they had this old documentary that I think LeBron James and Sloane Stevens did on like the
Mm,
best juniors in the country, right? And it was
cool.
from 4 or 5 years ago, and these 6 kids that like literally had everything handed to them. They were IMG kids, or they were, at the best academies in the country. And then I did some forward thinking of like, well, where the heck are these kids now? And like
Right.
the top rated kid on the podcast, or on the name doesn't ring a bell, but he's essentially at Michigan, I believe, just outside of the top 6 or playing 6.
Right.
And this was like the perennial US talent.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it's so important for me to understand from you, from what you've seen, like if you had to go put your arm around some of these kids in these tournaments and just be like, hey, comparison's the teeth of joy, and this is like sometimes going to be crazy for you. Like those are some of the things that come to mind that I would say, but what would you say to comfort them in these moments?
I would almost, for me, I've always found like actually taking a bad loss or getting a good win to be, I've swung way too low and high with them. And if you can find a way to not look forward but maybe accept both going in, like, yeah, if you project your next year or 2 years or 3 years, most likely the things that you need to do are going to help you, right? So like the things that your coach would tell you need to do for the next 3 years, which is play a lot of tournaments, practice these 7 things, improve these 7 parts of your game, get fitter in these areas. If you can focus on doing those, you're going to end up in a great spot. Most of the time, the results just would pull me from what I needed to do. I wasn't, they weren't that bad of results or that great of results either way, but whatever it was, good or bad, was pulling me from what I should have been doing. And I think now, because I'm older and also because I sort of got fed up with just scraping by wins. You know what I mean? Like just going on court, just doing whatever I could to try to win. I got fed up with that style of tennis and wanted to actually develop my game and like see if I could become better. If I get worse, so be it. I've already done it. I've been in 11.4 for like 6 years. All right, I got to stop doing this. You have to let yourself let that go. Not to make this a super long answer. When I work with the juniors at my club, I always say the better that the kids get, the harder it is for them to let go of their current level. So whatever, if you're a 7 UTR, it's a lot harder for you to take a loss than a 5 UTR because the 7 UTR generally takes more pride in their tennis. And as they keep going, it becomes harder and harder in my experience to get the player to let go, or to get myself to let go of what you see yourself as on court, and be willing to grow. So I would try to say all of that in like 4 bullet points to someone on court.
It's well said, and it's actually eerily similar to what I heard from University of Arizona's men's tennis coach Clancy Shields. He was a tremendous Colorado tennis player. When he was 12, 13 years old, he's winning, gold balls all over the place and crushing everyone.
Right.
And then he gets to 14, 15, 16, wants to try to go pro early, and absolutely gets dominated. And he's like,
Yeah.
Kollman, I wish if I had to do it all over again, I wish that I would have taken the time after my growth spur, and instead of continuing to try to play the way I was playing at 14, 15, 16, that I hone in on my fundamentals, that I get my tennis identity, rather than believing that the identity I had was at 12 would carry me into the pros.
Right.
I thought that was a really compelling thing that he said. But in order for kids to have the ability to be open-minded to taking a step back, to take 10 steps forward, they have to be able to see the vision. So ultimately, with your game, and it's really cool that the commitment your parents had to make the shift, to then you wanting to pay it forward by exhausting tennis because tennis is giving you so much, you want to give everything you can back to it. As I'm saying this, being able to think of like, what does success look like for you 3 to 5 years from now? I know you mentioned ATP point, but I mean, what defines success for this mission here?
Yeah, I think that getting the most out of my own tennis is the goal. I know that's a kind of general answer and super not helpful, but getting to a point where I feel like I've actually maximized, where I've done everything I possibly could to get the most out of my tennis and see where I end up. And if that's with an ATP point, if that's with a ranking, that's awesome. If it's growing my social media and that becomes even bigger, that's great. I don't get much excitement out of thinking about getting to an ATP point or getting a ranking and then that being it. I also don't get that much excitement about going from 30,000 to 40,000 followers. It seems like after 10,000 or after 1,000, it's all, it's a lot of the same. It's a lot of the same stuff. So a lot of it is personal when I talk about those goals. But if you want to talk about the kind of the outward side, like what I'm trying to do with the social media content, I really try to make it as realistic of an experience as I can, and then also try to make it as valuable. I always think every time I make a video, I'm honored that the person is staying on for another second. And so every time I mean, you don't know this, but I am a lunatic with editing videos. It is like if you were in the same room as me watching me edit a video, you'd be like, this person is crazy, because I record the same voice thing like 70 times. I'm cursing at my screen. Like it is wild. So most of it is getting better for me, and then also just maximizing the value of content. I want to be way undervalued on my social media always. When someone comes on there, I want them to always say, I can't believe you only have this many followers. That's what I like.
I appreciate the authenticity and vulnerability there. Editing videos, I myself am slightly dyslexic, so I try to tap into AI and some people to help me along the way. But no, I'm right there with you. I'm pretty particular and
Yeah.
try to make sure that I'm as streamlined as possible. But lastly, man, I got one more for you, and that's really this concept of, built to be. I shared with you the mission behind my work, and never thought in a million years that a stuffed animal would ever translate into me turning it into a positive, right? But
Right.
you had to take what you know now and go back to freshman Toledo Cole, and you get a chance to sit down with him, and knowing what you know now, encourage and give some advice. What would you say to him?
I would say that there's a lot of different ways that you can be successful. I think that there's a lot of success that comes with how much value you can provide to in a business, to whether it's through content. I think that how your experience of that success is probably defined by like your intention when you go into it. So like, why are you doing it? What do you get out of it? And making sure that I made decisions based off that, not just the result. Because it's just been amazingly, it's become clear to me in the last few years, kind of growing a business, being on that side of it, going through school, going through now this process, that emotions or the positive of a result fade pretty quickly. And then you're sort of left with the process of what you're doing, right? So if you can find a way to create a lifestyle or a journey, whatever it is that you are super psyched about going after every day, that's the goal. Because otherwise, my videos are 60 seconds of somebody's day. You're not really that important. So it's mostly just about how you're feeling about what you're doing.
Absolutely. Cole Shoults, how can we best support you? Where can we find you and stay on this miraculous journey?
So it is Cole Shoults Tennis, wherever, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. That's where you can find me. The best way you can support me is by going on there, watching the videos, and then telling me what you thought was good and especially what you think is bad. So that's what I'm looking for.
Love it, man. I'll make sure to have all those socials in the show notes. But ultimately, I love your mission. Been following you for quite some time now, and it's inspirational. I know that this sport has reaped a lot of benefits for me. My goal was Division I college tennis, and after accomplishing that goal, I have made it as contagious as I can to help people accomplish their goals. And I really think this communication and time together today is going to help a lot of people, man. So Cole Shoults, keep up the good work. Impossible's nothing. And thank you for joining me today on the BTB Project.
Thanks for having me. This was awesome.
Awesome, man. Thank you.